Good morning. This is Chelsea Morton.
And this is Phebe Sistoso.
We are TCKs, Third Culture Kids, and we have wanted to start this podcast, and this is our second podcast. Today we have a guest, Megan Carpenter. She is a TCK from Venezuela, and we're going to just ask her the same questions we talked about the last time we had our podcast. So it is good afternoon somewhere or good morning somewhere. That's where.
Morning here.
Yeah, here. So we're going to welcome in Megan. If I can unmute her.
Are you there, Megan?
I'm here. Hi.
Welcome to Between Worlds.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You're our first guest, so this is exciting.
Woo-hoo. I feel
So this is all new. So there's a question that Chelsea and I answered on the last podcast that we just wanted to start off with. What do you feel when you hear the word home? I actually had someone just ask me yesterday where I'm from, and it always, I don't know about you, but it kind of makes me go a little blank, and there's such a long answer to that question. So I think that's a loaded question for any TCK. So let's just start off with the hard one. So what do you feel when you hear the word home, or like when someone asks you where you're from?
Yes, you're right. That is a loaded question. I actually hate this question.
I know.
People ask me, and I usually, to be honest, I usually just give them a real fast, like, nutshell glimpse of where I'm from, I guess you would say, because it's very difficult to answer. And I feel like some people, they don't really always want to know the real answer. So I just give them the short version. In fact, it's funny, when we came back to the States, my husband, who is not a TCK, I had to kind of get onto him and tell him to stop like telling my story to everybody. Because when people would ask us, oh, where are y'all from? Where are you guys from? He would like launch into my, TCK-ness or whatever. And I had to kind of get on to him and be like, please stop telling everybody. I don't actually tell everybody because it's complicated, and I just, it's hard to answer. So I think it's a loaded question, because everywhere you are is home, but everywhere you are is still not home at the same time. So there's always another home that you miss, but and you just do your gosh darn best to be content where you're at and let that be your home for the moment, so that you can avoid like that constant like pulling feeling that you get, that you're missing something somewhere. And the other home that you feel, things are happening and going on and life is going on and you're missing it. So yeah, that's kind of I guess that's the best I can answer that question.
And that's exactly how I feel. So I think like that's why we want to do this. I'm like, there's people out there that feel the same way. Yeah. We really want to, like, I guess, say you're not alone.
Yeah.
The rest of us don't know how to answer that question either. So just knowing that there are other people that when cringe and feel weird with that question is comforting in some way.
It's funny too, because when I was actually living in Venezuela as an adult, we had a lot of missionaries working with my parents, and several of them had kids. And when groups would come down, or even like other missionaries who were not TCKs, right? They were just missionaries. They would ask the kids sometimes, where are you from? And they would ask these questions, and I would just cringe for them and feel so bad because you could see the kids, and if they were new to the field, they would usually give like their home state, where they were from. But the longer they had been there, it's like what is this person asking me? What is it that they really want to know? So you can just give them the answer that they want and move on. Like, so they can understand it, because they have no framework for how
Yeah.
you feel about home. They don't understand. So there's just no point in like trying to explain it all. That's kind of how I feel. So, but yeah, I always felt bad for the little ones who were still trying to figure out how to answer that question, you know?
Yeah, my parents would always answer with that we're from Arkansas, but ironically, until just a couple of years ago, I had actually never lived here. And so then whoever we were talking to would start asking questions, and I'd be like, I don't know.
We just pick a place. Can we just pick a place? What's my favorite place? Can I say Paris? I've never been there. I don't. I was thinking that when I think of the word home, I think of the song "Home for the Holidays." Like that drove me insane at Christmas time, because I was like, "What is that?
Yeah.
How do you say home for the holidays? Like, I just want to be home for the holidays." I'm like, "Oh, I don't know." So it's such a loaded question, and I think there's so many of us TCKs that just can't. I don't know. You just can't figure it out, and so I don't know. And even right now, I don't personally want to claim Arkansas as my home, but I've lived there for 4 years, so I don't know.
I know. Yeah, right? I understand.
Do you want to claim Springfield as your home, Megan?
Really, I mean, I don't feel that way about Springfield. It's where I live. It's where my current home is at, but I don't really feel like a feeling of like closeness or like connection to it, I guess. So
yeah. What was your family's home district?
They are northern Missouri missionaries. So yeah.
Okay.
So when I was a kid, I grew up in when I was younger in northern Missouri. And then again, my dad was the district youth director there for like 5 years when I was growing up. So we were there for quite a while. And I have lots of memories of that place as a child too. But I think that when we moved overseas, like my experiences just like impacted me so much that it changed. I don't know. It changed my view of everything. It changed my view of the world. It changed my view of home. It changed my view of how we interact with each other, of different cultures, it just impacted every part of me. Yeah. So I don't really, I consider that as one of my homes, but I don't really, it's like when I was a kid type of place, if that makes sense.
Yeah, childhood memories. We've talked about this before, and I remember that you mentioned this, Megan, and I kind of like this, where you said when you look at people, you look at their culture versus who they are. And I unpack that a little bit, because I love that idea of like.
Yeah, so when I came back to the States, I had a lot of, I guess, just culture shock with the dynamics in the US, like the racial dynamics, the like subculture dynamics here in the US, just a lot of those things. And then of course, I married a Black man, so even more I was sort of like thrust into this just new experience for me. And I realized that I have a very difficult time with some of the issues here in the States, because, well, number one, I didn't experience a lot of those things because I was having different experiences. But also, I don't really see people, not see people, I guess I don't think about who someone is based necessarily on their race or their ethnicity as much as I do as their culture. So I might see a person who is like any ethnicity, but I think about where they were raised and their cultural background, and that's how I make like judgments in my mind about maybe who they are or their value system, what they believe, what their culture is going to be like, because that's where they're getting their value system from. And I know that that's true of everywhere around the world. I don't care who you are. Like, your culture has an immense role on your value system. And so I don't really, yeah, that's how I see people. I mean, I see their different ethnicities, but I don't like make judgments about them based on their ethnicity as much as I do about their background and their culture, if that makes sense. I don't know.
Yes.
Here's your question.
And I resonated with that when we talked that a couple weeks ago. It was just, I didn't realize how much I do the same thing too, because, and even after, because my experience living in Thailand, it was kind of like, for me growing up in South America, but then living in Thailand, I remember getting on the plane and going, how in the world am I going to tell these Asians apart? And that sounds really bad to say. I feel so guilty saying that. Yeah, but I remember, like, how do you tell the languages? Like, not the Asian themselves, but like the languages. Yeah. And I realized the longer I was there, I could just tell. Like, you just started, like, the more I was in the culture, I was like, well, that one, and even in Thailand, they were like, well, this one is a Chinese Thai. They're not true Thai. And I was like, oh, I didn't know that. And then this one is a true Thai. Like, this is all Thai. And there was that difference. Like, I didn't even realize, like, and I remember flying back looking at, it was more of that, there was like, what are those things on the planes? I should remember this, the directions. Mm-hmm. And so when I first looked at it, when I was flying over, I was like, I can't tell which language is which. But then when I flew back again, I remember going, I can tell. I don't even know the language, but I had learned within the culture. And it was that, I think, I know, like, being an adult, I think, like you saying, when you were an adult in Venezuela molds you, like, being an adult in Thailand molded me. I mean, I still had a certain part of me in Ecuador and a personality, but being an adult as overseas changed a lot of who, my vision, like everything, like my life. It was definitely one way after college, and it definitely broke apart, and I came back a totally different person.
Yeah, that's very true. I think that's very true, because even when I went back to Venezuela as an adult, there were things that I had never, when I was a kid, I never had to open a bank account. I never had to, you know what I mean? There were just things. I never went grocery shopping. I never did so many things that, you do as an adult. And so, yeah, I mean, it's a little off topic, but it's true that you have different experiences as an adult overseas. And I think personally that when you're a TCK and then you move overseas again, like as an adult, your experiences are still different than if you move overseas randomly, but you're not a TCK, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Not that that's not valid. Those experiences are valid and good and important, but I just think they're different because you're already coming from a different framework. You're already coming from a different perspective on how you are going to learn to interact with the culture, even when you have difficulties doing so sometimes.
I think it's a little confusing, because if you just move straight to another country when you're an adult, and I saw this with my parents, I felt like that they kind of knew their original outlook and perspective, and then they were able to go from that to, okay, this is who I am, and now I'm in this culture, and this is how I relate as this person to this culture. Whereas if you're already a TCK, it is, I think, a gift, but it's also very disconcerting that you already feel like that you're sort of outside of your original culture. And I think that kind of speaks to what you're saying, that you interpret people based on the culture.
Did we lose Phoebe for a second?
I think she froze.
Oh no.
And that's not necessarily their fault, but I don't have the framework that they're expecting me to have. And I don't have the experiences that they're expecting me to have had. And so that's very difficult to, kind of navigate. And that's why I think going overseas again as an adult was strange, because it's almost like a double, not only am I in a different culture, but I'm not really from the culture you think I'm from. And so it mixes it up even more, and it helps you understand people, who are not, say, hey, stop, don't stereotype me based upon my ethnicity. And, it really gives you a way to understand others, but it's also quite confusing.
Yeah. And that's kind of what Chelsea and I had talked about too. When I look at people, I automatically know that there's a possibility that what I'm seeing in front of me is not really what's inside them, because that's my experience. So I assume that that's a possibility with a lot of other people that I meet, no matter what, where they were born or what their ethnicity is necessarily, but what's their cultural background, what's their framework. And so I definitely, you always have kind of like that one that, you know, like an open mind to that possibility, where, you need to kind of find out more before you start making some judgments about them, you know what I mean? About who they are and what you think their values are.
Because I'm a wild card. So I always know that someone else might be.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
I don't, and like I talk about the Enneagram a lot because I'm an 8 and I'm a challenger, and I think a lot more TCKs are challengers, because what hit me when I was reading that book was, it said it wasn't that you want to control everything, you just don't want to be controlled. And that was something that I realized in my past, in the like jobs and everything. If someone put me in a box and said, this is what you are, it just drove me insane. Like, I was like, do not put me in a box. It was just kind of, I never realized that that's how, because even as an MK, also, I coming back to the States, when people looked at my parents, because they were like pretty, with missionaries and stuff like that, it's like, oh, well, that's Chelsea Vegter. Like, they're always like, this is Chelsea Vegter, that's Jack and Trudy's daughter. It was always, I was always categorized, and like with, my mom had like a heritage of pastors, and I felt like I was in that like viewpoint. They're like, well, then this is what she's going to do all the time. And this is like, and I guess I just cannot, like, as soon as you decide for me what I am, I'm going to go the complete opposite. So I don't know if it's always healthy the way I did it, but it was like, but that's what I'm recognizing about myself. Like, oh, as soon as you tell me this is what, like, Mark and I joke about this. If someone tells me this is the best show ever, I'm like, I'm not going to watch it. Like when the Instant Pot was the best thing ever to buy, we just bought one recently because I was not going to go on that bandwagon. I don't know. It was like, why is it so hard for me to just not listen to, anyways. So we actually kind of went into the next question. How have you learned to navigate between the worlds? Like, even now, like with living in the States.
Oh gosh. I think that for me, the only way that I can navigate is to really, I think TCKs tend to be good observers of their surroundings, because they move around a lot, or they've experienced different cultures. They kind of learn to observe, get their bearings, figure out what's going on around them, so that they can then kind of figure out what the expectations are, right? So that they can kind of fit in, find a niche somewhere, right? So, and I think that even as an adult, I still do that. I mean, my poor husband, who is not a TCK, I don't think he knew what to do with me when we first came back, because I was just so, like he wanted me to make friends. He wanted me to jump in like church circle groups and different things. And I just was not ready. I had been out of the States for so long, and I knew I was kind of in for it, but when I came back, it was just so different. It took me a while to just sit back and kind of observe the dynamics and figure things out, and learn to kind of live within the cultural expectations, whether I like them or not. And that's probably my biggest challenge, is that there are things that I really don't like and I can't do anything about them because it's just the way it is, you know. And that's true of any culture that you move to, you know what I mean? There's always going to be pros and cons, things you like and don't like and whatever. But I think that that's been the biggest thing for me, is just learning to understand the culture that you're in, and learning to live within that frame, within those expectations, and not forcing your own expectations onto the culture, because you're just going to be miserable. And I have done that many times, and it's just, you're miserable. It's very frustrating, like, state of mind to live in. So
oh, go ahead.
no, I'm sorry. So one more thing, I just was thinking, the downside of it, and this is probably one of the hardest things for me, is that I do feel sometimes almost like a hypocrite. I know this sounds really weird. It's not because I mean, I feel like in a weird way, I hide a part of who I am, not because I want to, and not because I'm trying, like, I don't want people to see a side of me or something. It's just that that side doesn't fit. It doesn't fit in, like, you know, it's like the square trying to put it in a round peg hole. It just doesn't fit. And so I have to kind of keep it aside until I'm in a place where that part can come out. But of course, then when you're in that new place, then the other part goes to the side. And it's just like a constant feeling that it's very difficult to really be all of who you are at any one given moment, if that makes sense.
Yes, that makes absolute sense to me.
That's the biggest struggle for me in navigating.
Yes, you put it so well. Thank you so much. Yeah, I feel like that it's hard. You feel like that you're denying part of who you are, like you said, but then that feels bad, of course. But then how do you bring up in, like, the mothers of preschoolers meeting, you know, or this friend that you met, how do you bring up, you know, that I used to take the night train through China, and, you know, like, that was my vacation, you know, like, that doesn't, like, what are they supposed to do with that? You know, people don't know what to do with it, and it makes things awkward. So,
and it is yes, that's exactly right. It does make things awkward. And I have seen, and I especially see this when TCKs come back to the States for college, or when they've coming back maybe on furlough, if they're missionary kids or something like that, or whatever. But that really difficult transition into, like, suddenly you know, trying to figure out how basically the realization that you can't share everything. You can't be all of who you are at that, you know, with a person who doesn't understand your background. You just can't share everything, because, and it's not because of you, it's just people don't know what to do with it, and it's awkward. They don't know how to understand you. They don't know how to relate to you, not because they don't want to. They just literally don't have the same experiences. They can't relate. And so, like, it's almost like you're letting them off the hook. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
To force it on them.
Yeah.
When, yes, maybe if they could understand, you would be great friends. But the truth is they just can't. And so you're really trying to put something on them that they just don't know how to manage. And it's kind of unfair. I kind of have learned that for myself anyway.
Yeah. So who do you feel the most comfortable with? And in what situations do you feel like you can be your truest self?
Definitely other TCKs, for sure. That would be always number one on my list. I mean, I literally picked my college, like the university that I went to, because it had a large number of TCKs. So that was one of the main reasons that I picked that school. So TCKs would be first on the list. And then I think that for the most part, like, I lived long enough in Venezuela and I developed deep enough relationships there that my real friends did really have an understanding of who I really was. And I could really be my true self with them. Especially, of course, the ones who were maybe like expats or who had lived overseas, you know, had moved there, and who also had children who were TCKs. You know, they could kind of identify with me a little bit better. So those few, but it's a small circle.
Yes.
And, you know, it feels, I mean, just honestly, like it feels lonely sometimes, you know, like it does. And I mean, this is a pretty common conversation in our house of my husband, you know, trying to kind of help me and encourage me to make friends. But he just doesn't understand, you know, it's difficult. And I can have lots of acquaintances, and I do, and I would consider those people to be friends. Like we could hang out and have coffee, but it's just a different dynamic. So,
Yeah.
you know, yeah.
Oh, and I mean, I like to make friends, and that actually was part of our questions. Like, I like to a lot of make friends,
Mhm.
but I was convicted earlier this last week how like I just wasn't really being my true self. Like, and you're right, they can't handle it. Like, I think they're tired of it, and also like, well, as you guys both know that I deal with chronic pain, and that's another like thing that people struggle with. They're like, I just don't really want to hear about your junk anymore. Like, you know, and please don't talk about when when this happened and then this happened overseas. You know, I mean, I don't, and I feel like I can't. And that's what makes it hard to build community. And I struggle with that. Like I, on the other hand, like I'm dying for community. Like I can, like I, especially during this COVID, we've talked about this, like it's made it even harder. Like it's just, and so it's because we're already lonely as it is, like, because we don't are our true selves around certain people. I mean, I even in the TCK community, I don't think everybody connects with everybody because we all have different stories. And but I mean, I do think we all kind of maybe are pretending sometimes. I don't know. Just because I think even with TCK sometimes we're afraid of not being included because we try, it's
Well,
just
I
like,
think TCKs are good at pretending. I
yeah,
mean,
Yeah,
I mean,
we're good chameleons.
yes, we're
exactly.
good at it. We're very good at it. And so, you know, it's funny. I have a friend who talks to me and she tells me sometimes that I'm like, seem to be like a well adapted TCK. And sometimes I'm like, well, I'm glad that you feel that way. I mean, I hope that that's true. I don't know if it's true or if, you know, or if I'm just really good pretender. You know, because I think most of the time that I just do a good job at um you know, adapting, if I don't even know what the right word
Yeah.
is.
Well, I think this is such a fantastic idea that Chelsea had to even do this podcast and try to unpack this a little bit, because one thing I struggle with is that when you tell someone about your background, when you're vulnerable and you share all of it, the reaction usually is, you are so lucky, that's amazing. And they're picturing like, you're like me, but you got to have like this permanent, exciting vacation for a number of years. And that must have been amazing. And I mean, most people are not, they know that it's not all that, but it's hard to say, well, and it's hard too. And now I kind of have this awkward thing I'm trying to figure out, and I don't know what to do with it. But people there's no reference for that. There's no, like, most of the time, there's no support group that says, like, oh, okay, yeah, this is not always easy for you, and we understand, because
Yeah.
people don't. So it's nice to have a space to talk about that, hey, this is not always an easy to navigate. So
Yeah. You know, I didn't even know the term TCK until I was in college.
Mm.
And I kind of discovered it like by accident with I think it's, what is it, the James Pollock book, there's a TCK book out, and
Oh.
it's the first big one that they did with all the
Yes.
studies of through the years,
Mm-hmm.
of TCKs, and then determining what their experiences create in them, and what kind of culture they actually end up with based on their
Yes.
jumping around all the time and experiencing all the different cultures. And it was it wasn't until I read that book that I was like, oh my gosh, I fit somewhere. I actually fit in a group. There's a space for me somewhere, because I always felt, you know, even though I knew that I wanted to be around other missionary kids and other TCKs, because we kind of related, you know, I never knew that that we were an actual group, a subculture, basically, you know. And when I learned that, oh my, it helped me. It really did. It helped me so much to start to understand who I was, and that all of these kind of weird things happening inside my mind, and the confusions that I had at that age especially, were normal for a person who had had my experiences, and it was okay. All of those things were okay. And it helped me to kind of be okay with myself, and learn to accept those things about myself, and then learn to navigate them, and figure out how I could deal with some of them, and how I could just be okay with some of them, and just let them be, you know. So I do think that it is, you know, so important to try to, you know, find some sort of sense of community. And I see that in you know, I tend to kind of gravitate towards working with young MKs, because I just see so much of that, like, confusion and frustration in them. And you can see as they're, you know, trying to figure out that sense of identity and who they are. And I just feel like it's so important to try to help them, you know, navigate those transitional periods in their lives, so that, because most of the time their parents don't know how, because their parents aren't TCKs. So as much as they love them and want to help them, they just can't really relate, you know. So anyway,
No, that's right. So there's another thing that goes through my head is that, so there's one time I was asked to speak at this like small like youth retreat or something in North Carolina, and it was a Spanish church, and everybody there was like me but the opposite. And that was like the one time I felt very comfortable, because all according, like, with their ethnicity, they looked like they belonged somewhere else, but they really were American. They'd been pretty much born, raised in America, but their parents were, it's like the second generation.
Yeah, they're cross-cultural kids, basically.
Yes. And I remember feeling so more comfortable with them, because first of all, like, obviously my Spanish background, like that kind of, it's when you're around those, but I was like, I feel like there is a lot of people even in the States that probably are in that TCK but didn't grow up overseas, but they grew up in the States, but because of their ethnicity have been stereotyped, well, you don't fit in. And like, and I guess my heart also reaches out to them, because I'm like, what if they do, like, what, they're truly American, but they're second generation or something like that, like, but you know, they already, you know, people assume that they either speak that language of that other country just because of by the way they look or something like that. And then on the other hand, they look at us and they said, you can't speak another language besides what, you know, English. And I'm like, to be surprised, like, I can follow you in Spanish very which I've eavesdropped on a lot of conversations, so I don't know if you've done that, Phoebe, or Megan. I was like,
occasionally.
But
my son, my youngest, was adopted from Korea, and I think that adds sort of another layer. Like when we were in Korea, that was really interesting for him, because he looked Korean and people expected him to speak Korean, but he didn't. I mean, he speaks a few words, but it was kind of interesting that I don't know what it's like to be adopted, but the conversations we were able to have of, I look one way, but I don't quite fit in. How do I deal with this? Who am I? You know, and I was really thankful in that moment that I was able to relate to that and have some answers for him to some degree, you know, to say, hey, I know how that feels, and this is what I did, and this is, you know, so I think that there's a lot of ways that being a TCK kind of relates to different people's worlds. You're right. Like people, whether it's second generation immigrants, like my husband is actually a first generation immigrant. And just, I think that we tend to seek out those people that don't quite fit the mold. And we always feel like that we're sort of on the outside looking in. And for me, my peace has come more from accepting that and looking around for the other people on the outside looking in. Sort of the, maybe outcast is a strong word. That's not really the word I'm looking for, but those on the fringes. And I tend to gravitate more towards them. Like my kids say, I like weird friends. And maybe they're right. Maybe it's just the other people that don't really fit the mold. And I'm like, hey, we'll all just be different together. Like I'm a nurse midwife, and boy, talk about something that people don't even know what I do, or, is that like witchcraft or what are you doing? And yet, people, other nurse midwives in my life are very much sort of this kind of different crowd. You have to be able to do that. And I've found some of my best friends and my most connection there because they understand that, perspective of being kind of different and having to be okay with that.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I've had that's been one of my biggest challenges being back into the States, is just making friends. That's really been one of my biggest challenges. I just can't seem to like make friends. I make friends. I'm perfectly easy to talk to. We can hang out and go have a cup of coffee, but like, and sometimes I wonder if other people that I'm like trying to build relationships with, like if they feel that we have a deeper relationship than maybe I feel, because we are having different perspective on what friendship looks like. Yeah. I don't really know. I've never asked them, but I wonder sometimes, because I feel like for the most part, I don't know. I think they care about me, but I think they could live without me too, honestly. Like, I don't, you know what I mean? Like, I just don't feel that deep connection with people that I really like long for. That I really like crave that. And I hoped that when I started, like when we found a local church that we were going to consistently, I hoped that I would really find that there, especially because it was a smaller church. But I don't know. I tried. I really did. And there are people there that I care about, and and vice versa. But I don't know. I just can't seem to build like relationships with people. And the ones that I tend to gravitate towards are the ones who are just like crazy honest and open about things. Those are the ones that I tend to gravitate towards, that will really share like real stuff and real life. Those are the people that I want to be friends with. I just can only talk about the weather so much, honestly. I just I don't care about that stuff. And, I feel like if I can't talk about real stuff with people, I probably won't make much of an effort to build relationship with them necessarily, because I just want to have real relationship. And I'm probably used to trying to do it a little bit more quickly than other people are accustomed to or comfortable with. So anyway.
Well, I think because we either realize we either have a short amount of time, we could be gone soon. And I've built some deep relationships in different places. It was funny, in North Carolina at the church I used to work at, it was a very multicultural church, and some of my closest friends were like actually from Africa. Like I remember, like I was there, like I was in this lady's wedding. We don't talk anymore. I was there when the birth of her child. I was in children's ministry, so there was but we were really close, and I think it was partly because of this cultural thing. Like not that I completely understand her culture, but we were just kind of in like this roaming zone of cultures, but I remember leaving, and I think like some people were more close to me than I thought they were. Like and I was ready to be like, okay, it's time to move on to the next like group of friends that I will make wherever I'm at. Because I mean, I know we have Facebook and everything like that, and like, but I guess I was so used to, okay, this is only for right now, so just be those friends right now, and then and put all in I guess the effort. I mean, I love making friends, but I mean, as in deep friends, like thin friends that have spanned generation. Like I have a couple of those, and it's funny. One, my best friend that she lives in California. She's actually like first generation Chinese. Like maybe that's probably why we met in Thailand. And long story short, and then another friend. She's actually not a TCK, but we met in college. But like she's been like a prayer person, and she was always the one that would tell it to me straight. Like she wouldn't ruffle around the edges. She was just like, Chelsea. Like if I was in a dating relationship, she's like, you're an infatuated. That's not a good relationship. I was like, oh, okay. Like I needed those kind of people. I think you want somebody that really tells it to you, like is honest with you and not gonna fluff it up. I don't. It's just interesting. It's interesting. I mean, I'm good. I feel like at least for me, I'm good at like initiating relationships, but in the end, like sometimes I don't. And Phoebe knows a little bit more about this, but like the reciprocal, like I give more than I think that they give back. And because I'm so longing for that connection, and then I probably give focus too much. Like I give too much, and I'm learning now, like Chelsea, you just need to like maybe pray for the right person to be, because that you can be honest with and everything, and that could iron sharpen iron kind of thing, because that's giving yourself to multiple things is not necessarily unhealthy to my husband. You know what I mean? So but I don't know where I was going with that, but I guess we talked about like making lifelong friends. Like, so I want to ask this last question. What do you do when you say goodbye to your family and friends? Like how is that work?
It's almost as bad as the first question.
I'm killing you.
Yeah. So, oh gosh, I'm really bad at saying goodbye. I really am. I've gotten better over the years, mostly because I have literally forced myself to say goodbye in a more healthy way. But when I was younger, oh gosh, I was bad. I mean, I just didn't. I mean, I just would never allow myself to have any feeling of those goodbyes. And so the older I got, it was like there was a buildup of all the goodbye emotions like stored down in me. And then as I got older, it was harder to contain it. You know what I mean? So I just had to like clamp down on that. Like nothing can get out, or else there will be an explosion of emotional goodbyes from my whole life, you know? And I tend to be like a pretty sentimental person. It just in general, just my personality. So this is like a lot. So I finally started like this last time when I left Venezuela, I really, forced myself to be more proactive about like telling people that I cared about them and what I was thankful for them, like especially those people who were, closer in my life, and really making myself say the things that I needed to say so that I could have, some closure if I never saw them again, or if I never, and I know nowadays too, like with Facebook and Messenger and, all of these things, it's easier to keep in contact with people to some degree, but I'm honestly not that kind of a person. So I tend to go. When I go, and I have to have some, at least a little bit of cutoff, or else it's just too hard. It's hard for me. So I have a few friends, close friends that I, kind of are scattered all over, that I do really keep in touch with. And that's it. I mean, I talk to people on Facebook and, oh, how's it going? Whatever.
Different.
But yeah, those real like lifelong best friends that I really keep in touch with, we have more meaningful conversations still, we really check in on each other, those kinds of things. So yeah, I just try to make sure now to be more proactive and tell the person that I love them, that I appreciate them. The last time when I was in Venezuela, I think I wrote letters too, which is easier for me because I can say what I need to say and then like, here, just like this. I can't like it's still hard to have that conversation because I do still have like, again, some build up. But yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
No.
Rambling.
It's I mean, I actually just wrote letters recently to a couple friends that have been faithful friends for a while because I get it. Like, well, and if I'm not, I'm like in tears or something like that. I just I mean, I went through counseling in college just to figure out how to say goodbye. Like, because I used to actually make people angry at me. Like, so I'm like, I used to do something to make them like, because I was like, I don't want you to like me when I leave. I want you to not want to think about me. And this was way before they had like, I mean, that obviously it was not healthy to do that. But I mean, I clearly remember even like, because I'd come home for the summer and do like a summer job, and I would just go sit in the back corner and like pouty and just like, waiting for them to invite me up, or, just like, I just want to stay away, like kind of slowly phase myself out, or just like cold turkey. Like, I think I did that one time, and I didn't intentionally do it, but I did move jobs one time. I was so I moved jobs a lot, and and I think I really did hurt a lot of people, but I didn't. It was just like, now I try to keep in contact like through a text, but a lot of them couldn't handle it, and so like it was too hard for them for cold turkey. Like that one day, I've just like, I come back, I'm like, hey, I'm moving to a different state, and they're just like, obviously things are a little different now. My husband helped me stay a little bit more. It's probably good for me, but I just move every 2 years or a year and a half. Like I'm done. I've got everything out of here that I need.
And people can think that you're cold and you don't care, but it's really a defense mechanism. You know what I mean? It's a protective, you're trying to protect yourself, and in a roundabout way, sometimes other people too, from the emotions of it and the pain of it, but it has the opposite effect. It doesn't work. You think it does, but it doesn't.
Yeah, it's very, I mean, you just have to say goodbye so many times that you can't. And then also, you can have, I always would have a best friend wherever I lived. And then honestly, we hardly would talk after I left because I felt like I can't keep up with this many people, it's just almost impossible.
Yeah.
And I think that I come from a really big family. I have 4 sisters and 4 brothers. And so that was fantastic, moving around a lot, that we were very close, and I'm closer with some of them now than others. But I feel like on some levels I've been a little bit almost unhealthy with that. Like feeling like if things were going hard in my life, I just want to go home, even though I have a husband and children. Because that to me was home over the years, was my brother. They were the only people that I did not have to leave and not see again. And so, or even if I did leave them and they were gone, like they were the people that I kept up with over the years. And so I think that just I don't know, that definitely is a difficult aspect of being a TCK. I was thinking this week, I find such great comfort in looking at the life of Christ. I've been watching that show, The Chosen, and just thinking about how much I think Christ lived on the edges, and he moved a lot, and he was definitely with those who didn't really fit into society and didn't really fit in with what the culture of the time. I mean, he kind of came to disrupt all of that. And I think that's one thing I just love about Jesus so much, that he gets me. I feel like in that way that I don't have to fit in to be with him. He doesn't fit in either. He's like, cool, Phoebe, that we'll be that way together, you know? And so yeah, I've just been thinking a lot about that this week.
Yeah, I think that that's a really good point. And I think it's kind of like what Chelsea was talking about earlier, like that challenging personality. I think that TCKs tend to, I mean, this is generalization, obviously, not every person, but I think that in general, they tend to either always be pushing at the status quo and the norms, or they just meld into whatever, whenever, and just go with the status quo and with the flow to blend in and fit in. I feel like it's usually like one or the other. And that, I mean, I tend to be more of a challenger as well, especially in like the church and Christian community, and it's exhausting. It's so exhausting because you feel like you're like this little ant pushing against a boulder most of the time. It's just exhausting. But it's like you said, when you look at the life of Christ, that is exactly who he was.
He was
constantly, challenging those, the status quo, the norms of what, had been and was now changing as Christ was, on earth, and then, obviously his death and resurrection. But it is kind of, when I get exhausted with it and I pray about it in my frustration, I feel the Lord very much saying, identifying with that and understanding it. And then also, there being a bit of a like reprimand, like, oh, Megan, then who? If you don't want to do it and you just want to blend in and you just, you know what I mean? Then, okay, who are the people that will then that will then challenge and push so that, growth, because some people just need challenge. I don't know. They just need a little push. I don't know, but
I agree.
Anyway, it's challenging sometimes.
Okay.
For sure.
And it's hard to challenge it all the time, because if you get a feedback of it's it's
lonely. I mean, it's a lonely life. It really is lonely, because most people don't like to be.
But Jesus at the very end was very lonely. All of his disciples fell asleep while he was praying, and I feel, and even his best ones, like Peter, turned from, like, denied him. I mean, I can't even, like, when I struggle with relationships, I keep thinking that's like the worst of the worst. If a friend actually denied me and said, I mean, and anyways, like, I could, that is actually a book title. It just like popped in my head, because Jesus is a TCK, like TCK, like, I just, because he truly is, like, he is. I mean, obviously he relates to everybody, but for us, like, you're right, like, when you look at him, he's outside that norm, and he's on the fringes, and he invited the fringes to his group. And that is huge, because he invited also the rich and the poor. Like, he cared about both sides. And so that's I think that's a good closing note. So, but anyways, I just want to thank you so much, Megan, for joining us. This is our first official podcast interviewing someone, so this is huge, and I have no idea when we'll actually post it. Like, it will, but it'll be on my blog. As far as I know, my husband's supposed to be doing that side of everything. So anyways, but thank you for being a part of this, and thank you, Megan. And if anybody that hears this wants to support Megan and Tech on their missions to Ecuador, which is obviously my home, tell them where they can find you, at least so that they know.
Oh man. I mean, they could definitely find us through the AGWM website, and I mean, you can find me on Facebook too. My husband has all that information about, like, the links of where.
And have an Instagram too?
We have our missions, Facebook missions, Carpenter missions on Facebook.
Carpenter missions
as well.
Okay.
Okay. So, well, hey, maybe if we can get some supporters after all this, like,
Amen.
I was like, anything to help.
Thank you guys for having me. This was fun.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
Fun. Always fun to chat with TCKs.